Hello there, listeners to the Bylines Network podcast, and welcome to another episode of Bylines Reports. This time, Ginny Smith is back, interviewing Tan Dhesi. The first turbened MP in any European Parliament. He is the MP for Slough. In this interview, Ginny asks him a variety of questions involving his position on Brexit, the strategy of the Labour Party, and the rise of the Reform UK. Please give it a listen.
So to introduce you to our listeners and our viewers, and to really kind of give an overview of your background. So you've served as the MP for Slough since 2017. Before that, running your own construction business and serving as a councillor for many years on Gravesham Borough Council in Kent, and later as mayor. You're also what my daughter would call a maths geek, having a degree in maths and management studies from London, from the University of London, and an MPhil in the history and politics of South Asia from Cambridge University. So incredibly impressive CV. And that's something I'd like to come back to in a little while. But first, I would really like to kick off by hearing more about your early life and your education, and particularly the early life experiences that shaped your later ambitions and opinions.
Well, Ginny, I was born in the Slough area, and that's where I spent my formative years. So my parents had emigrated at different times. My mum came with her parents earlier, and she arrived in the 70s. My father, he came in the late 70s as well. They got married. They settled down in Slough. That's where they got their first ever rented accommodation together. Then they went to another place. So from very humble beginnings, they went on to eventually buy their first ever house. And at that time, we lived in the Chalvey area of Slough. But then they took quite a crucial decision in my life, in that when I was about 4.5, they decided that they wanted me to go and study in the Punjab in northwest India. And that's where I did most of my primary schooling. And that, I think, was a pivotal move, because it made me not just more conversant with my own family links, with my ancestral heritage, but also I ended up getting a love for different languages and cultures. So that's where the Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, the South Asian languages, and even when I came back to the UK, age 9, I went on to study other languages, and I now have a working knowledge of 8 different languages. But that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, had it not been for that decision early doors about going and studying in the Punjab. So that's in terms of my formative years, and we can discuss further about other aspects. But you mentioned about Gravesham. So when I was 9, then when I came back to the UK, we'd moved to a town called Gravesend in Kent. And that's because my father, who used to be working in a Ford factory in Langley in Slough, he unfortunately was made redundant. The Ford factory eventually went on to close. My mum, who used to work at a petrol pump company on Farnham Road in Slough, they decided that they were going to move. And they went on to set up their own small little construction business, which was run out of our garage in Gravesend. And hence why I also got a love for the construction industry at a very young age, because we got blooded into what was called the building game at a very young age in the teenage years.
Absolutely brilliant. But how was it, Tan, for you coming back from the Punjab with all the colour and the culture and so on to Gravesend? What was it like at the age of 9 for you re-entering the UK and presumably picking up schooling in a state school at that point?
Yes, so Ginny, I mean, moving out of the UK was a major move. Moving back in was considerable. You've got to get used to a new style of teaching, new curriculum. You've got to make new friends. You're in a completely different environment and a cultural set. But I think in hindsight, it enhanced my learning capabilities, and it broadened my horizon. So I looked at things in a very different manner. And I think it also, like I said, whether it's my love for languages, whether it's mathematics, as you said, maths geek. In India, the maths teaching was at a more advanced stage. So even at a young age, you were really pushed to achieve a lot more, especially in maths. So all of that, I think, really helped. But yeah, it was, although I'd been coming back to the UK for holidays, so whenever I had holidays, I would come back, and mum and dad, whenever they had holidays from working in the UK, they would then go out to India as well. So while I was out there, I was with my grandparents, uncles, aunts, and so on. So I formed a very special relationship with all of them as well. And it made me more at ease, and it made me more capable of being able to traverse between different languages and different cultures at ease. But without a shadow of a doubt, I think coming back here to, especially the grasp of English, how that was taught, while it was taught out in India, and I was at an English medium school, it's still not the same as the curriculum here, and you've then got to acclimatise to that whole situation. But yeah, it took some doing.
And do you feel, just thinking about that, your Sikh background in religion, and the Punjab, do you feel that your religion helps you now in a way navigating a world which has become increasingly really distorted by mis and disinformation, and where Donald Trump launches attacks on world leaders, which seems so much against a precept, I believe, of Sikhism, that truth is the highest virtue. How do you draw upon your religion in our current world?
Well, Ginny, faith is very important to me. Family is very important to me. Community is very important to me, and all of those values are very much at the fore of my thinking when I'm serving. So, the values from my faith, and that's one of the reasons why I ended up becoming a Labour member, because some of the values of Sikhism, they're very aligned with the socialist principles, for example, of sharing with others. That's one of the key tenets of the faith, and the strong work ethics, are working hard. So people are equal. That equality aspect within the Sikh faith is very important as well, and that's exactly how I look to serve my constituents. So that I often say that, look, regardless of somebody's background or gender or colour or creed, my job as a good Sikh, as well as a good Labour MP, as a good person, is to be serving with that very ethos. And you're right, we live in, many describe as a post-truth environment where the levels of disinformation and misinformation are considerable. So disinformation, where people are setting out to literally misinform people, but then the misinformation aspects is where people inadvertently end up forwarding things, whether it's on WhatsApp messages, whether it's on Facebook groups. They see a picture, they see the half story, then they put that out there, and before we know it, the narrative, the public narrative, has completely been distorted. It's been changed. So we have got to be careful. And I often say this to people, especially to young people, when I'm out and about doing school assemblies in Slough, or engaging with constituents, old and young alike, that please be very, very careful that you do not want to inadvertently end up misinforming yourself and others by what you end up sharing. So I think we've got a major problem in terms of our democracy, and that's something that I've discussed not just in my role within the Defence Committee, but also on the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy, that we've got to be very, very careful. We need to overcome this, because otherwise it will overcome our democracy.
And I'd love to pick that up with you downstream, but just thinking now about your election to Parliament, first entering Parliament in 2017. I know that Caroline Lucas, I think in her first book, described, what a very weird experience it was for her. I wondered how you experienced it. And, as I think the first Sikh MP to sit in Parliament. So how did you generally find the Palace of Westminster and the whole sort of environment during those first few months?
Well, Ginny, to become the first ever turban Sikh to be elected to any European Parliament, let alone the UK Parliament, I think was an incredible honour and a privilege. And in fact, I felt the responsibility even greater. I knew that I had a special responsibility to the good people of Slough who had elected me back in 2017, so 8 years ago now. It just seems such a long time ago. That the extra responsibility was because I knew that many within the Sikh community, for them, it was a major watershed moment. So they had their own expectations. So I had my Slough constituents with their expectations, people within the Sikh community, because for them, that pressure was immense. And that was brought out to me, as I said within my maiden speech, that I went to a wedding up north, and this elderly Sikh gentleman came up to me, literally with tears streaming down his eyes, said, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "We are so, so proud of what you've done. Well done. Now just don't let us down." So within one foul swoop, he had lifted me up to say, "Look, I'm really, really proud of you. Your amazing achievement. Just don't let us down." Yeah. So that encapsulates the Sikh psyche as to what that achievement was. It wasn't a Tan Dhesi or a Slough achievement. As far as they were concerned, I needed to discharge those duties that they could feel proud. And I knew that any mistake on my part would be seen in a very, very negative light by the entire community. And I think they would have felt very let down. So that's why I make sure that whenever, before going into any debates, that I am well read up on what it is, research, I know what I'm going to say, and then the key is to get it out from somewhere in that brain, to get it out onto your tongue and lips. And yeah, touch wood, so far it's all been working well for the last 8 odd years. But no, it is an incredible honor, but it's with that comes huge responsibility.
And just thinking back to your CV, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, is a very impressive CV, I think that you're slightly more unusual amongst the more recent intake of Ps who, and I know this is one of the things that Alistair Campbell mentioned, for instance, as a concern of his, and many of whom have come directly from university into a political role and then eventually have been elected as MPs. And the concern is that loses us a whole swathe of background and experience that used to exist in the House of Commons. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about how we can attract a wider group of people to imagine that they could be MPs, including, of course, people from ethnic minorities and people from less privileged backgrounds.
Well, I'm very, very proud to be a British MP within the most diverse parliament ever, wherein we have more women, more ethnic minorities, more LGBT plus people, more disabled people than ever before. I think that is to the credit of the British people who have elected such a diverse range of parliamentarians, and they're diverse in their viewpoints as well. They come from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different priorities, from single mothers to people who've worked in business, who worked in law, who have done incredible things in an array of fields. And as far as my own life story is concerned, my aim in life wasn't even to be an elected councillor, let alone an MP. My aim in life after my schooling and after university was to follow in my parents' footsteps, who from very humble beginnings had gone on to, as I said, to set up their own small business. And that's exactly what I did. Straight after finishing university, I went away from the southern comfort zone and moved up to Bonnie, Scotland. So for 3 years, I lived and worked in Scotland. I set up my own construction business, and yeah, it did well. With the help of a very, very strong team, we managed to get lots of contracts in different parts of Scotland. So we're working in the Highlands to the very, very rainy Salt Coats area of Glasgow on the west coast, to eventually going on working in different parts of the country across the UK. That it was that I really enjoyed, and that's what I thought I loved that aspect of running a small business and helping it to grow. And I knew that the more I put into it, it was a risk and reward as well. So you've got to be working all hours under the sun and beyond. So sometimes I was working 7 days a week. It was an incredible thing. But then I only came into elected office and into public service in a roundabouts way, in that I thought my calling in life was working for myself, running a business. But as I often say, sometimes you determine the path in life. You set out with your goals and you achieve those. But sometimes the path finds you. And for me, it was very much the latter. And how I ended up coming into politics was I was a member of the Labour Party, and I was one of those that just paid my subs and kind of just let somebody else, that's Ginny's job, to be a councillor or to be an MP, that's somebody else's job. But when I was approached first time round, then I had to respectfully decline, saying, look, I can give some more funds if that's what's needed for your campaign, but I haven't got the time of day to be standing for elected office. But then when they came back after another 4 years, I think they were really, really scratching around for candidates then, because they couldn't even get the full list of candidates. Because at the time I was living in Kent, and that's not exactly known as the Socialist Republic of Kent. It's very much one of those Tory heartlands. But then I had a chat with the missus, I had a chat with the family, and they said, look, this is your opportunity. This is only part-time. Being a councillor, it's a part-time role. Meetings are in the evenings. I'm sure you can manage it. You can put something back into your local community. And it's very different to being an MP, by the way, Jenny. That I think is a full-time role, and I think MP shouldn't be doing anything else. All these people with second, third, fourth jobs, some of them making more money with those than they are for their main primary role as an MP. I just think that is absolutely ridiculous. And I've often spoken up against that on the floor of the House as well. But yeah, so going back to I stood back in 2007. Lo and behold, I was elected. And then the more and more I did it, the more and more I enjoyed it. I loved going into the council chamber, having a debate, a ding-dong with somebody. That's because I was one of those that actually read the reports, and I could then point out 1 minute. So we were in opposition. So we lost in 2007. I may have been elected, but we weren't in control. So holding people to account, that just came naturally. I think as long as you were armed with all the facts and figures. So I did that. And then the local party made me the chair of the local constituency Labour Party. 4 years later, I was a mayoral candidate, so I ended up becoming the mayor of the town. And it just went from there. And then lo and behold, in 2017, Theresa May, bless her cotton socks, decided that she wanted to hold a snap general election. I put in my name to represent Slough, along with more than 100 different people. And after grilling sessions from the National Executive Committee and others, I came through the process and I was a candidate. And the good people of Slough elected me, and then not looked back since.
Which is an amazing achievement, Tan. That's absolutely fantastic. Just picking up that reference to, I guess, one of the people we might both have been thinking about, who you were referring to as having at least 2 other jobs, Nigel Farage, the leader of the Reform Party. And I was going to lead us into thinking about the local elections coming up on May the 1st. What appears to be Reform's lead currently in the polls in many areas. How concerned are you about that? And why do you think it's happening?
I think we should all be concerned if you have individuals who will end up damaging the country if they are more appealing or attractive to people within the country. Then we've got a problem, and we've got to fight that battle. We've got to show people what will end up happening. When you have people coming in from extremes, they will seriously end up damaging the social fabric of the country. They will end up damaging our economy. And in the long run, they will damage our international relations. And they will hurt working people. They will hurt those people that are the most vulnerable, that need the support. because on a whole array of fronts, as far as reform is concerned, whether it's with regards to the NHS, how at one point Nigel Farage is saying, well, look, I believe that we should end up paying for that, moving to an insurance-based system. Next minute, he says, well, look, I think we need to be free. Next minute, it'll be something else. The fluctuation, the populist nature of what he's doing and moving from one end to another, that's really is not good, whether it's in terms of somebody. I mean, you look at those involved in reform, many of those are former Tories. Nigel Farage, he might try to portray himself as sort of champion of the working classes. He's far from it. Very, very rich, multi-millionaires, former stockbroker he I think would be very much a Tory at heart, although now he's trying to dismantle the Tory party and try to take it over. But yeah, we've got to make sure that we fight the good fight, whether it's with regards to reform, whether it's with regards to other extremist tendencies. We've got to make sure that we chart out a way which is inclusive, which ensures that everybody is better off, that we have high quality free healthcare, free at the point of need, high quality education for all. We need to ensure that that system works for the British people. So we've got a lot of work to do. If we haven't been able to get that message out as a Labour Party, I know the government would be working hard. I don't speak on behalf of the government, but I know that they are trying with their various policies. But it just shows that we need to work harder, because if we are not leading the conversation, if we're not leading in the opinion polls, if we're not at foremost in people's minds, then that means that we've got work to do.
And what role do you think that social media plays in the rise of populist parties like Reform?
Huge. And we've seen that a lot of the misinformation, disinformation is actually channeled through social media. And that's where the likes of me have been saying for years that social media companies must also be held to account. So just as a newspaper, just as yourselves, as Bylines Network, you're held to account. Anything a newspaper publishes or a TV station publishes, they can be taken to court. They break rules and regulations. And we need to have a framework for social media as well, because it's just not right where people's lives can be destroyed. We've had issues with deep fakes. We've had issues of revenge porn. We've had issues around children self-harming, these very, very murky environment on the web. And that, I think, is we do need, not just as parliamentarians, but as a society, to delve into and make sure that we rectify those things, because otherwise it could lead to serious harm for those people consuming that content. But also then it could lead to tension. We saw what happened after those abhorrent killings of the three young girls in Southport. And then what did that lead to? The racist riots that we saw. And those were fueled by disinformation and misinformation, especially via social media.
If I could switch now to your role as chair of the Defence Committee, which in the past always have been important, but obviously it's absolutely critically important and central now. Really interesting role, several areas that the committee is exploring that it'd be interesting to talk to you about. But firstly, I thought it might be great to have you explain a little bit more about the role of parliamentary committees, because some people listening might not be entirely aware of the role that they play and how important they are actually in the democratic process.
What a time to be chair of the House of Commons Defence Committee. And I'd served previously on the Defence Committee. I'm a graduate, by the way, of the Royal College of Defence Studies. So that is a network wherein more than 100 senior military leaders from around the world, they come to graduate from that course, and an incredible experience as well. But being an MP, you're constantly learning on the job anyway. But the Defence Committee's work is always important. It's always one of the most influential and important committees within Parliament. But at the moment, its work has literally just shot up the agenda. And that, I think, is not just to do with Tan Dhesi, by the way. It's more to do with what is happening globally in terms of some of the geopolitical shifts, the change in the US administration, what that has entailed. We've got the conflict ongoing, especially in Ukraine. So within our continent, there's a lot of consternation with Russia's illegal invasion and what that has meant for the defense and security of our continent. So it's now been brought a lot closer to us simply because of that conflict in Ukraine. I know there are various saddening conflicts, lots of atrocities happening across the globe. There are, we've got currently conflicts in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia. But I think the Ukraine conflict in particular brought home to many people about what could happen if that was to escalate and if that was to widen, that if Russia was able to fully take over and invade Ukraine, if they were then to move on to the next nation and so on. So that's, I think, has brought the work of the Defence Committee into sharp focus. With respect to select committees, so how parliamentary committees work is that you are answerable to Parliament. So when I was elected as chair, I'm elected by all of the 650 MPs. So 650 MPs, it's one member, one vote. And the chair of the committee has to be elected on a cross-party basis. So believe me, that is a very sophisticated electorate. And I had to prepare leaflets. I had to canvass opinion. I had to go and speak to not just Labour members, but Conservative, Lib Dem, Green, people from all different political parties, that you have to go and convince them as to why they should vote for you and not one of the other MPs. So the vote of the Prime Minister is just as important as the vote of a backbencher. A Labour MP's vote is just as important as a Conservative MP's vote. So that is why it is very important that you are able to get that message across as to why it should be used. So to gain the trust and confidence of fellow MPs, that gives you the mandate, and you have the mandate of the House when you are conducting your work as chair of the committee. Then what happens is, for example, on the Defence Committee, there are 11 of us. So the House elects the chair. Then the remaining 10 members, they are elected on a proportionate basis. So at the moment, from the remaining 10, 6 are Labour, 2 Conservative and 2 Liberal Democrat. So because the Labour Party has a considerable majority, they've got 2/3 of the MPs. So that's why the other 6 have to be Labour MPs. So they're from the governing party. But they are elected solely by Labour MPs. So any Labour MP could put their name forward, and we had a full-out election for that as well. And ultimately, 6 individuals were successful, so they would then get elected onto the Defence Committee. Amongst the opposition parties, it's all done proportionately as well. So here, the Conservatives ended up getting 2 seats. The Liberal Democrats, on some committees, they've got 1 position, and then 1 has gone to another party. But for the Defence Committee, both were allocated to the Liberal Democrats. So they had their own internal contest for this. And that's how we ended up with the 11 members. So the work of the Defence Committee then is we would hold evidence sessions, inquiries, hearings into different things. So far, the Defence Committee, by the way, has published more reports than any other committee. We've been working at a rate of knots, recognising the importance of defence and the crucial times, the critical times that we are living in. We knew not only did the government have to up its game, but we as Defence Committee members had to up our game in order to hold the government, in particular the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary and the Ministry of Defence, to account, because it's important that, that's what the British people would want from us. So far, we've already published reports, for example, on service accommodation. So that's where we, along with many other people, felt that the level of accommodation, the quality of that was just not good enough. We had issues with damp, mold, rodent infestation. A lot of that came out within our inquiry. Then we published a report into that. We also published a report into Global Combat Air Programme, so GCAP. That is a joint initiative between Japan, Italy, and the UK to develop the next generation of fighter jets. We held another inquiry and published a report into AI in defence, so how we develop expertise in that to ensure that we are at the cutting edge of things. We've also published a report recently in terms of the Armed Forces Covenant, to make sure that we are discharging our duty to our brave servicemen and women, their families and veterans, because so often that is not the case. And now we've also launched inquiries, Jenny, into AUKUS. That is a trilateral partnership between Australia, the UK and the US.
Just to pick you up, because I was on that, I was really interested asking you about that and finding out more about AUKUS. Yes, as you say, the tripartite partnership between the US, Australia and the UK. And I wondered what the thinking is at the moment, given the recent security lapses on the part of Pete Hegseth and some insider descriptions of things in the Pentagon being in complete chaos and a state of disarray, personnel being used across various federal agencies, so that, there's a suspicion that those focused on foreign influence and intelligence gathering are being downgraded. How is that impacting thinking within that tripartite partnership? How reliable does the UK and Australia still see the US as an ally?
The sort of things that we will be looking into. So we've just this month launched that inquiry, and we want to see what impact recent geopolitical shifts have had on progress with regards to AUKUS. So we believe that it's a very important partnership going forward. Australia and the US are very, very close and trusted allies. All three of us are Five Eyes partners, and Australia has always been a very, very strong partner, especially of the UK, going back not just decades, but centuries. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that. And we want to make sure that some of the recent changes, for example, with the US administration's decreased presence within Europe, for example, how that's going to impact, and how also, for example, AUKUS, by the way, is like pillar 1 and pillar 2. So not only is it about the provision of those nuclear-powered submarines for Australia as part of pillar 1, but it's also then about how different technologies are shared between those three partners, and how we bring in other allies into the mix as well. So all of that needs to be discussed. But yeah, there is a lot of considerable concern and consternation about the US administration as to where they are going with things. And that really has come to light, by the way, in another one of our inquiries, which is UK's contribution to European security. So we felt that what's going on at Ukraine at the moment, that we need to show solidarity. We need to support our Ukrainian friends and to preserve their sovereignty, their right to exist as a free and sovereign nation. But the impacts on European security and how the changes that are, and it's been considerable changes since last year, how all of that being impacted. So we're hoping that these things in due course, once the committee has held all of our hearings, then we would try to agree upon a report, and then that will be published. So a lot of that will be coming out into the public domain, touch wood, in the not too distant future.
And picking up the issue of Ukraine and whether or not the US continues to support Ukraine militarily and financially, if that support is pulled, what's your view of the possibility of a coalition of the willing being able to in any way replace it, so that Ukraine can at least continue to defend itself and hold the situation as it is at the moment?
Let's not be under any illusion. The US has been the largest provider of support, both financial, military, and also in terms of other aid during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So over the last few years, they have by far, as the single most important nation, Europe as a collective has been very, very generous, and they have donated more. But as a nation, the US is by far the most important. And that is really important because we saw recently when the Ukrainians' access to Starlink, for example, when Elon Musk made his pronouncements, the impact that had when the US decided to stop temporarily the Ukrainians' use of their satellites and so on, that is incredibly important. And even, by the way, if anybody is in any doubt out there, for the UK especially, our relationship with the US is incredibly important. Not just in terms of defense and security. You mentioned earlier about intelligence sharing, also in terms of business and trade. millions of jobs on either side of the pond are dependent upon that relationship. So we need to do our level best, and that's why we have been pushing the Prime Minister to make sure that he does his level best to try to consolidate those relationships and try to bring people together. We do not want any widening of the ruptures between NATO allies, in particular our European friends. We've got to be very, very close with our European friends because our security is intrinsically intertwined with theirs. Okay, the US, there's the Atlantic Ocean in between, but I think as allies, the US also needs to be cognizant of the fact that they also need allies, not just in terms of European security, but globally. They stand tall, they stand free if they've got good friends. And that's something that I would want our Prime Minister to be reiterating, to doing his level best. We all saw the horror show that was the meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky in the White House. And that only benefits Vladimir Putin. So we've got to make sure that we do our best to engage different allies. And the UK, by the way, has a very important role to play in that regard because we are seen as the conduit between those two continents, and especially given our close ties with the Canadians as well, and the Australians and others, and New Zealanders, we are seen as a place whereby we are able to facilitate those close relationships. Part of the Royal College of Defence Studies, as I mentioned, more than 100 different military leaders from around the world, they come to London because London is that magnet. That's the platform which facilitates all of these discussions and all of this learning. So I hope that the government is able to achieve that aim, because otherwise it won't just be the Ukrainians losing out if the US decides to walk away. It would also be the US and other allies, European allies, that would lose out as well.
The puzzle that some people have, the rather puzzling view of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves's red lines, and why they appear to be absolutely adamant in ruling out a closer relationship with the EU and the possibility of rejoining the customs union. Most economists seem to feel that the fastest way to achieve growth is actually for us not even to join, but to apply to join, and that would instantly attract more inward investment. What are your thoughts about that?
I campaigned for Remain. Unfortunately, I lost that argument along with nearly half of the population, and we are where we are. Yeah, we tried in 2019 to have the opportunity for people to have on the ballot paper a leave deal that was negotiated by the Labour Party, by a new Labour government, versus remaining in the EU. Unfortunately, the electorate rejected that in a significant way, and we ended up comprehensively losing that election. So I think that's why in the run-up to the 2024 election, many within the Labour Party felt that, look, we do not want to rehash those arguments. We need to be very, very clear in our promise to the British electorate that we're not going to be rehashing old arguments. What we will commit to is we will not be going back into the EU. We will not be going back into the customs union or single market. And let's not have that debate. This is a debate on our National Health Service. This is a debate on the economy. This is a debate on what sort of society that do we want to live in within Britain. You're right in terms of the damage that has been done by the as I said to Boris Johnson, you've not just come back with an oven-ready deal, you've come back with something which is half burnt, and it is badly burnt, in fact, and that is why we will be losing out in a massive way. And that's exactly what's happened. Our economy, our GDP, according to independent experts, has decreased by almost 5%. That's a massive hit to our economy. So what the government has set out is that, and what we've signed up to is, look, we need a closer, more collaborative relationship with the EU and with our European allies. And the Prime Minister was very clear on that before the election as well as thereafter, that we've got a mandate to renegotiate and to make sure, without going into a customs union or a single market, we've got the mandate to have those closer ties. Let's see where those negotiations lead us, whether the EU wants that. By the way, it's not just about the new UK Labour government wanting it. The EU have also got to want it. So we've been pushing the government that we need those closer ties, because prior to Brexit, more than half of our trade was with our European neighbours. It is incredibly important that we get that right, whether it's in terms of defence, whether it's in terms of business and trade, on a whole array of fronts. And that's what I hope that the government and the EU will be able to negotiate very, very quickly, because otherwise I think it won't just be the UK losing out, it will be the EU losing out as well. I think it's in both of our interests to tackle the major challenges facing our continent, that we have that closer collaborative relationship.
Thank you, Tan. So for my very last question, it's a sort of slightly left field question. In these times, as we have identified, of turbulence, some turbulence and a good deal of mis and disinformation, what, for you personally, what gives you hope for the future?
What gives me hope is we can but live in hope. As I say, I am always an optimist. There's always challenges in life, but I think that there is so much potential, not just for our country, but also as humanity. We are capable of immense kindness. We're capable of extraordinary feats, whether it's through technology. So as we face the challenges of the global climate crisis, as well as the cost of living crisis, I know there are a lot of people who are really, really angry with what they have in life, that they just feel that they're not getting the rub of the green. They deserve more. There are those that are more vulnerable, that cannot even make ends meet. So there are huge challenges. But I am confident that if we put our minds to it, if we work in a very open, kind-hearted way, that we can overcome those obstacles. But we need to make sure that we are aware of the dangers that we face as well. So while we're optimistic, we need to be ready for the fight, because the dangers are through that disinformation and misinformation, as you pointed out earlier as well. And also, it is a battle of ideas. We believe in that collaborative approach, a more cooperative approach, where we share with others, where we look after the most vulnerable, where we have a more equal and a more just society. And that equality aspect is important to me personally, as I said at the outset, in terms of my own faith, but also in terms of what I believe that we should be as a society, that everybody's equal, regardless of background or gender or colour or creed. But we've got very dark forces working against that, are more selfish. It's all about their own self-interest rather than us collectively moving forward. So let's see who actually wins that battle. But we've got to be ready for the fight, and we need to take the fight to those people.
That's a great message on which to end. Thank you very, very much, Tan. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciated, and hope we'll meet up again in the future.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ginny, and thank you very, very much, Mr. Dhesi, for agreeing to be interviewed by us. And thank you for listening. If you wish to keep the lights on and help us support us in our endeavour to hold truth to power, please contribute to our donation page. The links will be in any description below. See you next time, listeners.